Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. I'm StoredIQ, your coordinator for this session. Thank you for standing by, and welcome to the webinar on Accelerator GDPR Unstructured Data Recovery with StoredIQ Cartridges. During the course of presentation, all participants' line will be in listen-only mode, and post that we'll open it for Q&A session, for which the instructions will be provided. Now, without any further delay, I would like to hand over the proceedings to our first panel member for today, Ms. Trishula Jain. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Trishula Jain. I'm the Product Marketing Leader for IBM Asia Pacific region for Unified Governance and Integration. Welcome to our today's webinar on your unstructured data could expose your GDPR vulnerability. As you all know, GDPR came into effect on May 25th. It's been close to a month now, and already there are complaints against many leading companies about violations which may attract heavy penalty. Have you completed the key readiness actions for unstructured personal data of your data subjects? Handling and processing personal data of your data subjects, especially unstructured data, requires appropriate technical and organizational measures. In today's webinar, Rakesh Mahesh is going to show you how you can use the IBM Unstructured Personal Data Discovery solution to your advantage. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Rakesh Mahesh. Rakesh is a technology evangelist for analytics. He's passionate about helping clients to succeed in their analytics journey. He has been with IBM for over 5 years now and has worked on big data and analytics assignments. At present, he is the segment leader for Unified Governance and Integration for India and South Asia. He specializes in brand and product management, consultative and solution sales, client relationship management, and building partner ecosystems. Prior to joining IBM, he has worked on a business development manager in Tata Elxsi and design consultant in Mahindra Satyam, Germany. Without further ado, I would now hand it over to Rakesh.
Thank you, Trishula. Thank you, Subhadeep. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rakesh Mahesh, and I would like all of you to thank all of you to join this webinar. The theme of this webinar is all about unstructured data and its governance. So let me get started with this. I hope we all can see the screen here. In my opinion, unstructured data is a beautiful beast. The reason why I call it beautiful, because it is a source of your sustainable competitive advantage. Why it is a beast? Because by design, it is chaotic in nature. It requires you to be disciplined. It requires you to have framework solutions in place to take care of its complexities. And that's why I call it a beautiful beast. It depends on us or our customers how we want to leverage it, whether we want to use it to attain a sustainable competitive advantage in the market, which is pretty commodity in nature. I mean, how much can we do by increasing the the loan basis points or increasing the interest rate on saving accounts? We would not get much advantage there. But if we read that 80% of that dark data, which is still there as dark data, we have no clue what is going on in that landscape, we can actually achieve that advantage. We can achieve that competitive advantage with respect to our competitors in the market. So as Sheila explained, that it could expose us to those set of regulatory companies, entities which are coming up with those heavy-duty laws to ensure that, well, the intention is good, right? It is to protect the personal data of those consumers, citizens. But at the same time, it pushes the companies to the limit to ensure the data is protected. They have proper discovery and mapping mechanism for that. So without any further ado, let me get started. I hope I have set the flow here, what we are going to talk about in the next 30 minutes, which is basically in 3 sections. It's all about inside a company, the unstructured data is important. The second section would be about its relevance in GDPR context or the Indian privacy law, which is around the corner. And the third one is about IBM solution. So going to the next slide, the GDPR. GDPR is the talk of the hour, right? And we have many discussion points. We have many content openly available in Google. And now every other person in this space is an expert on GDPR. So we can't really go any further than that in terms of knowledge base in GDPR. Well, of course, when GDPR was there in terms of an introduction, it created a panic situation across the industry. Companies were running from post to pillars to understand how it is going to impact me and how should I create a framework or a proper solution in place to address all its 99 articles. And how would I protect what the regulators are asking me to protect? So in a snapshot, in the next slide, you can see that the GDPR got enacted on 25th of May, 2018. Basically, it covers all those entities. Doesn't matter whether you're operating in and or out of outside the European market, but if you are dealing with the European data subject, which is basically the residents or citizens in Europe, be in the form of your employees or your customers, you have to be GDPR compliant. And the repercussions are pretty huge in nature. It is something like 20 million pounds of fines or the 4% of your bottom line, whichever is higher. And one interesting or striking introduction in those 99 articles was the turnaround time for those breach reporting. It was earlier, well, in the practice, what we have seen in one of the electronics giants, when the breach happened, it took them 203 days to come up with a detailed report, which is now expected to be done in 72 hours. That's why unstructured data is so important. You need to have a proper platform to address or trace that unstructured data in every possible form present in your organization. And that is going to reduce the time. Okay, not going to talk about all the 99 articles, but we have segregated those things in 5 fundamental pillars in terms of duties, obligations, and of course the sanctions. So while you can read it on the screen, I'll just explain the gist of it. The first one is the EU data subject rights. So the GDPR authorities have given certain rights to the citizens or the European data subjects, which helps them to have proper access to their data in your system. Do you have the portability facilities or access it for various other services, benefits, or in fact to erase it if they want or they have a logical reasoning behind it. So to do that, it is a overwhelming task for the respective entities, be it banks, telecommunication companies, retail entities, you name it. So they need to have a proper mechanism, proper data layers by maintaining a proper data quality of those data subjects, because it is not only their personal identifiable identity, it is also the metadata related to that, whether it is residing in an endpoint in one of your engineer's laptops sitting in Sydney, or it is in one of the mobile devices, or it is into the last mile of your data center. It is utmost important that you have the traceability of each and every data and metadata. The second is security of the personal data. Now, in my opinion, in IBM, we strongly believe that security can only be obtained if you know where the data is. That is where the discovery and mapping comes handy, and it's very important for us to know where my data resides. So that's all about the security of personal. Then, of course, we have tremendously powerful tools in IBM to take care of the encryption, to take care of the security of those set of data. The third dimension in terms of obligation is the consent management. The consent management, I mean, gone are the days when you can simply put a statement in your sign-in or sign-out page stating that you have to be abide by the terms and conditions. It has to be a decipherable language. It has to be in a decipherable language, plain English, which can be understood by the consumers, the local people, and then they provide the consent in what format you can, or in what form or what purpose you can use their data for other activities. Now, for example, Sainsbury or any retail company is trying to onboard a customer and utilizing his credit card details for auto payment. In the sign-out page, you just mentioned terms and conditions. There, you have to properly mention that if you can use his data for a targeted campaign, the customer has to say yes to that after understanding those set of terms and conditions. Even if he's allowing and later on he wants to delete that, you have to abide by what he's saying because he has a logical reason behind that. So that's all about consent management. Then the fourth one is accountability of compliance. So it is a kind of system you need to have in place where you have to prove to the GDPR authorities that you are in compliance with all the 99 articles. It is not by just a statement. You have to show them the framework, the journey, the different modules, the different tools that you have applied so far or in the process of application, which will eventually make you GDPR compliant. So it is that accountability which matters. It has to be shown to the GDPR authority. And the fifth one is all these systems in place has to be by design and by default. When I say by design and by default, that means GDPR authorities, they want to see whether it is just a short-term measure that you have taken or it is a long-term ongoing process to ensure the security of the European data subject. So you have to ensure, you have to show them the roadmap by various tools, various policy remediation in the system that you not only addressing the current data security challenges, but also you have a mechanism in place for future concerns. And of course, the sanctions I've already spoken about, which is in terms of financial collapse, what you can encounter if you are not compliant with all these GDPR norms. The next slide is basically a preparedness for us, a solution framework. Eventually, I'm trying to focus it towards that unstructured data. But if you see from a 30,000 feet view, the architectural preparedness can only come if we have a policy layer. The blue pillar, horizontal pillar, is a pillar which actually dictates different policies, audits, processes, rules to cater to those five dimensions of GDPR from a data discovery and mapping aspect. So for that, you need to have data management layer. Now, data is residing in various forms in various enterprise-wide applications in different system of records. Of course, the security pillar is cutting it across, no doubt about it, but you cannot unearth or discover or map those set of unstructured data which are without having a data management layer. Now, when I say data management layer, I'm not asking or suggesting to have a data repository layer. Now, that's different. Data repository layer is where you are creating a copy of those set of data available in the enterprise-wide applications. What I'm talking about is a data management layer, which is an inherent architecture of our solution, which should enforce those policies, process, rules to the data in its native form and native location. That's where actually it is a secret sauce. You are not creating a copy because GDPR is not asking you to create a repository. Rather, it is suggesting you to remediate it in its native form. And that was the objective of showing this slide. This is the very basic fundamental readiness or the first step which we need to take right. Now, unstructured data, when I say, it could be in various forms, right? Now, let me tell you something interesting about unstructured data. Why we have 80% of the data in unstructured data and only 20% of the data in a structured format? Because unstructured data provides us an inherent flexibility in punching in the data in a required format. Now, there was an interesting case in a hospital. It was a best practice which they developed over a period of time. So whenever a doctor used to come to visit a patient, they had to go through the prescription and the patient report. Now, the patient report was a form, and a very rigid form which had typical set of data. Doctors complained that with the patient form, we are not able to get a potential reason or a profound reason why we should visit him next. So the authority allowed them to have a text field at the bottom of that form where they can put the data which is not cannot be filled in the rigid application form, the patient form. You can put it in a descriptive language in the text field. By doing that, later they realized the text field is actually covering more than 50% of the space in the patient record form. That's exactly what happens in an organization. Because unstructured data, which is the PDF, Word, Excel, your business reports, your clinical documentation work, progress notes, everything gives you an inherent flexibility to punch in data. And that becomes a chaos in the system. And that is what we are talking about here today. Now, then the next slide, in practice, to address those 5 fundamental pillars, what usually we do in practice is a little flow. Just be with me there, what is happening. Look at what is happening here. So the sensitive data in the data management layer. Then usually in practice, we do a data discovery and classification. And then after that, in the governance layer, we provide certain policies, governance policies, to maintain the data quality, to have a metadata properly streamlined, properly attached, create the data sets in a unified format. And then we decide, based on our policies, audit principles, and different rules, whether to retain it or to dispose it. Then, of course, once we are done with that stage, we go for masking or encryption as desired by various applications and various business rules. At the compliance and security layer, there are some user activities which is happening, and in the GDPR practice, we have to take care of the identity and access management. And then, because of the encryption and masking, we have to do the dynamic blocking also not only for example, in a credit card dynamic masking, but also at an access and identity management layer. And then subsequently, the incident reporting, vulnerabilities, and the CDO's discretion to decide who needs to see what. Now, the basic message objective of this slide is basically what is the practice in an architectural overview we should adopt to be GDPR compliant, and how the data management layer plays an important role, because that is the area of inception. So again, I'm coming back to the same point where I'm saying if we do not take the first step right in terms of data discovery and classification, it is going to have a very tremendous repercussion on the subsequent steps in the GDPR practice. That's the message in this slide. Again, reiterating, the discovery and mapping of those sensitive data, which is almost 80% of the unstructured data, is of utmost importance here. Now, coming back to the capabilities IBM has from an analytics perspective. So if you have done enough research in GDPR, the set of capabilities in GDPR required by different solution providers are in 2 dimensions. One is the security aspect and one is the analytics aspect. There are 6 areas where we provide the solutions. One is the data assessment layer. The second one is the information governance layer, then the security layer, of course, not from more towards from an access identity management, but more towards from an encryption. Then the consent management, which I explained earlier, then the right to erase, which is basically European data subjects' rights. How can we cater to that? And then data pseudoinitiation, data masking and all. These are the 6 set of capabilities which from a GDPR aspect we provide to our customers. Now we have spent almost 15-20 minutes on the problem statement. Let's spend another 15-20 minutes on the solution. So we have a solution from a discovery and mapping perspective only focused on unstructured data, because today's theme of this webinar is unstructured data governance. So to take care of that, we have a solution called StoredIQ. I would request the moderator to play the audio visual so that it can give you 2 minutes dump or the understanding what exactly I'm talking about. Okay, so I understand you got a fair bit of idea how StoredIQ helps enterprises. So how StoredIQ helps enterprises in addressing, governing, managing those unstructured data. So what is StoredIQ? Again, let me give a little different perspective here. StoredIQ basically helps you to identify, classify, and manage according to the business value. Manage your unstructured data according to your business value, which eventually helps you to reduce the risk and cost. So it's basically a very powerful data assessment solution, not only in discovering, but also recognizing and acting on the unstructured set of data. So it works on a couple of technologies underlying there. But the most important use cases which you are seeing on your screen, the first one is the intelligent e-discovery. So suppose a company is in some sort of litigation and they want to see the depth of that litigation affecting its different business units and what could be the size of the penalty and all, then this really helps you in figuring out at what level of data the litigation is there. The second is the data cleanup, which is a classical as well as the traditional use case of StoredIQ, which helps you to do the ROT analysis, basically the redundant, obsolete, and the trivial data analysis, and also to help you to maintain, do the defensible deletion and a timely destruction of those records, quite aptly applicable in insurance and banking industry. The third one is the supporting compliance and audit activities, which we are talking today in terms of GDPR, or if the Indian privacy law, which is around the corner, it is applicable to that. And the fourth one is the record retention, which is basically applicable to all the companies, because every company is under some sort of regulatory authority, be it IRDA, be it BSI, BASIL, all these authorities. And it basically helps you to create a topology map or heat map, and helps you to retain those documents which need to be there. So, for example, as per RBI, you need to keep the customer's record even after the dissociation of that customer with the bank for the next 5 to 7 years. How would you do that in case of any further future unprecedented litigation? You need to keep those records, and if you cannot, then that would lead to a huge penalty. So in those cases, not only for GDPR, but also other cases, it helps you. So these are eventually the 4 use cases. Now, before I go further, I would like to highlight one potential benefit or a massive advantage of StoredIQ is you don't only look at it from a regulatory or compliance aspect. You also need to look at from a business value aspect, right? What sort of sustainable competitive advantage it can garner to your organization. So, for example, dumping the data into the enterprise data warehousing is not going to be enough for you. You need to have a system like this in place, which would create which would rather lay a very fundamental foundation in understanding that unstructured set of data, so that you can decide or you can conclude the consumer behavior patterns. You can conclude on the buying patterns and diversify your business further. So as I told earlier, that in banks or insurance industries, you cannot simply increasing or decreasing the interest rates, you can attract customers. You can rather diversify your business and can provide more personalized services to your customers. And it is doable. It is not only in theory. It is very much possible, and companies are doing it in practice by utilizing this tool. So coming back to the previous slides where you saw there are 6 analytics capabilities. Here, from a StoredIQ perspective, there are 3 areas where we can cater to the GDPR requirements. The first one is the data assessment, second one is the data security, and the third one is right to eraser. This is basically the rights of the European data subjects. We'll go one by one. The first one is the data assessment, which starts at the data management layer. And the first step, which I emphasized earlier, was the data discovery and classification. So this slide, it speaks out loud, right? The regulated data is everywhere. Rather, to put it in another way, wherever there is data, it has to be regulated. Just a moment. I hope you can now see the screen. So what I explained earlier, I thought it was visible to you all. Yeah, thanks. So these are the 4 use cases which I explained: intelligently discovery, data cleanup, supporting compliance and audit activities, and the record retention. Then the GDPR capabilities, which are the 3 out of those 6 areas, there are 3 areas where we are catering to the GDPR requirement through the StoredIQ. The one is data assessment, the second is data security, and the right to erasure, the third one. First one is data assessment for the data discovery and mapping, which starts at data management layer. And as I told, this particular slide speaks out loud that wherever the data is, it has to be regulated. It doesn't matter in what format they are, it has to be regulated. And the first step is its mapping. Now, what are the gaps, the typical gaps in an organization, which are also the biggest opportunity for improvement? The 70% of the typical amount of data are unstructured, and has no value. So out of those 80% of the data, we don't even know that how much of the data is having some business value to me, because another Gartner report says that almost 35 to 45% of the data is of no use within 1 year of the creation of the data. So all these things actually we take into consideration when we do this typical gap analysis through StoredIQ. And another advantage of StoredIQ is understanding the data in its native location, in its native form. Now, the reason why we are unique in the market, you cannot simply develop a crawler or a scrawler in the system and can leave it to crawl across the organization, because every application has its proprietary format of file storage and archival. So you need to have a universal tool which can go access those vaults, read that data, and can give you a dashboarding. That's important. That's very, very important. Now, for example, how do we do that? So this is just a snapshot of your typical day with StoredIQ. So you define set of policies, you define set of info sets. Info sets inside StoredIQ are basically logical group of objects pulled in together. So we create those set of rules. We seed different system of records into the tool, and then we start exploring what data in a Swiss system, be it your mails, be it your SAP ERP, be it your CRM, be it your collaborative platforms, social platforms, Twitter, Facebook, everything. You just start feeding in there, and then you create set of info sets and then set of rules on top of it. Then you start refining those filters. For example, I want to see this particular Mr. Sherman's record of credit card records in this 5 ERP systems. Then it will show you not only his records, but also their usage over a period of time. You define that period of time, and then it will show you with what system, with whom his records have been shared, and that is very, very important. Why? Because you are not only ensuring that his data is secure, is contained, but also you are able to see in which system his data has been shared. So when you are deleting his records, not only you are deleting his records from the parent vault, you are also able to delete it from the secondary system of records where his data has been shared. And then heat maps. If you read the text there, it shows the overlapping. The more the squares are, the pillars are, the more the overlapping. Now this overlapping is what I'm talking about, where his records have been shared, where there is overlapping through mail, through social interactions, through different application crawlers. It all gives you that in a kind of a dashboarding. This is your typical day with StoredIQ. This is what happens. And a lot of things which goes behind the screen, which I will tell you in the next slide. So what happens? You data about your information. So that the way it reads from the native location is first is identify the data sources of that particular rule or the info set that you decide. Then, very important thing is the metadata linkage. It also helps you to link that metadata. Now, let me give you a little perspective here. We, through StoredIQ, can, almost in a week time, we can do 1 petabyte of metadata linkage, which is otherwise, which takes around, months, if not years. And within 48 hours, we can do an index of 1.48 million objects, which is something like 441 gigabyte of data. That's how scalable and how quick, agile this tool is, just to give a little perspective. Then it basically harvests the data, metadata, the full text harvesting, and start linking that to that particular info set. Then automatically, based on some ML, machine learning algorithms and learn algorithms, it does the classification of that relevant data. And then in that same dashboard, it gives you the ability to action on it. So you are not going anywhere for taking action on those data. You can set rules there to take action. You want to delete it now, you want to delete it after some time, as per the policies, as per the rules set by the CDOs, the Chief Security and Compliance Officers. You can all superimpose those set of policies to take action on it. So it is about, in the first set of things, it's all about volume, the example which I gave you. And the last two pillars is about relevance. How, and remember, if the regulator says that you have to delete this gentleman's data in your system, and later on they found that somebody operating out of Melbourne has some trace of data of that particular customer, that's a huge penalty. That's a huge penalty. How would you ensure that this particular record has been deleted and there is no single tiniest trace of that data? This particular tool helps you to do that. How does it do that? So basically, the StoredIQ has two technologies, I would say, to explain in the business language. Later on, we can arrange demo for people who are interested. But to understand in a more business language, we do this in two mechanisms. One is regex, which is basically regular expressions, which is nothing but a set of characters defined for a search pattern. So instead of writing all these, on the third and fourth line, you can see there are some scripts, codes written. Instead of doing that, you just simply write Swift code or IBAN code, and the system will recognize which are those possible IBAN numbers available in your system. Now, how cool is that? You're not writing any code. You're just simply writing Swift code or IBAN as a definition to source that data, and it will fetch you the data. This is also based on learn algorithm, which is widely accepted in the banking industry for ID numbers, social security numbers, passport numbers, credit card numbers. So it helps you to do that as quickly as possible instead of you writing those codes. And the second one is basically the annotation query language, the AQL language methodology, in which the StoredIQ helps you to figure out the names, those addresses, all those descriptive things, the keywords, term matching. And then eventually we do the content classification through that. So this is how typically a StoredIQ agent gets you or fetches you the data in the system. Now, this is a fantastic thing about our StoredIQ with relevance to GDPR. In the next slide, what you are seeing is the cartridges. What are those cartridges? These are downloadable, predefined downloadable modules to extend the StoredIQ landscape. So we have built one basic cartridge and an advanced cartridge, which has already those policies, those articles, definitions fed into the system. And then it increases the landscape by giving you all the GDPR related data discovery. So ability to detect bank account numbers, national identification numbers, passport numbers, relevant to addresses, relevant to the EU countries, supporting those languages, everything. So you are not going to do it or reinvent the wheel again. You just plug in the cartridges. It comes bundled with the tools. You just plug in those cartridges and voila, you will get all those discoverable data right in front of your screen. So one example, like you found some personal sensitive information. Now you will do what? So you will then create some set of rules, how you want to act on it, whether you want to move it, whether you want to delete it, whether you want to pass to a different application for its encryption or extrapolation. All these things you can do in the data assessment phase of StoredIQ, so which is otherwise a very humongous task. Imagine the volume that we are talking here. You are trying to find a data set in a particular PIN code in a European country, and all their data, metadata, and then their different system of engagement, through different system of engagement, their account, their credit card number, their transactions, loans, everything you are mapping in the system. And you can take action on it. You can pass it to a different application also. Then the second one is securing the personal data, of course, which is nothing but once you took the first step right, which is the discovery and mapping of those set of data, how can you secure the data? So we also have a solution called Guardium, which works hand in hand with StoredIQ for masking of that data, to take certain adequate measures that secures the PII data or sensitive PII data. So you can see the approach, which is basically, the personal data, encryption, then assessment, and then controllers. So basically what happens is if a controller is asking the data, collecting the data, it gives to the data processor. Now, data processor cannot process data without a certain set of rules, certain set of policies. Those policies can be reinforced, can be enacted through StoredIQ and Guardium. So for example, if you are collecting this customer data from this particular PIN code in the European country, and for that particular application, these set of metadata needs to be masked or needs to be encrypted. Then you can define that in the StoredIQ, those set of rules and policies, and then you can pass it on to Guardium to take action on it. And the outcome is what? The sensitive information is encrypted. So you know what is sensitive information through StoredIQ, then you encrypt it to Guardium. That's basically the message here. The third one is a request. So I'll give you an example itself. So in the next slide, you can see the right to erase the request. Another good part about this StoredIQ is that it has inbuilt those workflow things built in there. So a case is created in response to the eraser request, and then all the stakeholders are intimated about that, and all the IDs of that customers are retrieved from different systems, and then you take action on it on the dashboard. So I'm seeing some questions from the audience, and I hope the moderator is taking a note of it. We'll answer all your questions once we are done with it, probably in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So this is how we help companies to give that access, the rights to those European data subjects if they come to you asking for either move their data or delete their data or to take certain portability services from you from different services providers. So this is how we do. So this is something like purpose. What is the purpose here? The purpose is the rights granted to those European data subjects for their access, their rights to the data access. Then approach is, workflow routing, who is responsible for that, who needs to approve it, who needs to review it. If another important thing is, it's not necessary that if somebody is coming with a request to delete his records, you simply delete it. If you have, GDPR says that if you have a logical reason behind not deleting his data, you can still retain his data. You just provide the logical reason. Now, how will you get to know the logical reason behind that unless you have that visibility of what kind of data that person's data is residing in your system for what purpose? Again, that discovery, StoredIQ will help you to figure out why his data has been retained, for what purpose it has been retained, with what authorities his data has been shared, who has the visibility of his data, all these things. So you can take a conscious decision, not just blindly delete the data. Take a conscious decision whether the data needs to be deleted or not. And the outcome is, of course, the client is happy that he has gotten his wish fulfilled, or if not, then he has a reason why the data has not been deleted. And this is, of course, the privacy by design. That is what it helps you. So we are almost at the end of this presentation. We would love to show demo. Today we can't because of the paucity of the time, but we would love to show demos. Whoever feels that it is quite relevant to their organization, you can reach out to me through LinkedIn or to the moderators or to Sheila through our LinkedIn profile, and you can reach out to us for any demo request, and we would love to do a demo and give you an experience how this tool works. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much. And Subhadev, if you have collected some questions from the audience, I would love to answer those questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahesh. So ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask any question, you may use the chat facility to send your questions to all panelists. We already have received few questions on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, so Rakesh, we've been receiving quite a few questions here, so I'm going to get started with that. So there are quite a few actually. So how many questions? Maybe we can address 5 to 6 questions within the time that we have, and then how do we, how do we get the rest of the questions addressed? Is please share your email. We should be having your email IDs, and we'll get back to you through an email about the answers to your questions. So I'm going to get started with the first one. So I have a query about identifying the sensitive data present in the file, which is in .tiff or .jpeg format using StoredIQ. How do I handle this?
Yes. So StoredIQ is pretty good at understanding 450 different kinds of files in its native form. Whether the Microsoft is storing it in .psd file, or the Lotus Dominoes is storing it in .nss file, or any other application. .jpeg is nothing. I mean, in any other form, there are 450 different kinds of file extensions. We can share it with you, and StoredIQ supports in unearthing and discovering those set of files.
Thanks, Rakesh. The next question is, why do we need Guardium? We should have a unified tool that can both classify and protect the data. For example, Enterprise Recon is a tool that has both these functions.
Yes, so no contention on that, but it is important to first understand the relevant data. First, you get that relevant data, and then it is a very seamless exercise. The Guardium will be behind the screen for you to act on it, and then you just pass it on that sensitive data to Guardium, and then Guardium will take action on it. Here, the purpose is not only to delete. The purpose is to delete the relevant data, or to act on the relevant data, or to encrypt the relevant data. That is the most important thing. I mean, there are tools available which do not have this logic which I explained to you, those infosets, cartridge, regex, and then AQL. These things are not there. So that means they will not be able to give you a relevant set of data. Now, relevant data is very important. Once you figure out the relevant data, then you take action on it. And we will ensure through a tight integration that you are not hopping on from one tool to another. It is a seamless experience. It's just we are telling you that there are two technologies behind it to help you take action on encryption. That's why Guardium comes into the picture.
Okay, and the next question is, do you have any solutions for small size companies that handle B2B data for telemarketing?
I need a little more elaboration on the small, did I hear small solution or something like small companies, right? Solution
small
for small
size companies. No, the question is any solution for a small size company that handle B2B data for telemarketing?
Yes, so this StoredIQ is applicable for all shapes and sizes of the company. It's not necessary that you need to be a big mammoth size enterprise-wide company. It is not necessary. A small company like a business BPO organization or a marketing organization can also use StoredIQ. It is the licensing is very flexible. It is not user-based. It is capacity-based. So whatever capacity you need the licenses, you can buy the software based on that. So it is applicable for any size of the company, to answer your question.
Yeah, and another interesting question, and this is one of my favorites. So it is something around, is StoredIQ only solution to ensure GDPR compliance, or does it help multiple products, or does it require multiple products, and how is solution offering positioned with respect to license model?
Okay, so that's a pretty long question, so let me break it down and answer one by one. The first one is it the only solution available in the market? I can boastfully tell you it is the only relevant solution available in the market. There are solutions available which can give you, without any logic, that this is the number of data of that particular person which is available in the system. But IBM is the only company which will ensure that when we are taking on any action on that particular data, it is taking an action to the last mile of your data center, to the very remote endpoints, to the very end of your organizational premises, because we have certain technologies behind that. And it not only gives you that data, it also gives you the overlap. So with whom this data has been shared, in what format the data has been shared, you can have a complete traceability of the data. So if tomorrow GDPR authorities come and ask you about the data journey of that particular European data subject in the last 3 years, you can actually give in a very graphical or pictorial format that this is the journey of the data. No other tool can give you. Now, addressing the second question is whether can it work alone or does it require any other system in place? Well, of course it can work alone, but the real business benefit from a regulatory and compliance perspective, of course, it can work alone. But if there are certain leaders out there in the audience today who wants to squeeze the maximum juice out of this unstructured data for a business, value-driven business outcome, then they can utilize certain other governance tools, like, for example, the integration tool, which would cut across the organization. Doesn't matter in what form the data is being accumulated. Then creating an enterprise catalog in the organization so that the metadata can be linked and be read in a simple, unified language by not only by the CEOs or the CXOs, but also the technical people. There is no misunderstanding. So defining the business glossary, the enterprise dictionary, to all the data assets and data sets, and also the 360-degree view of the customer. So these are all governance tools. So for StoredIQ to work, you may adopt all these tools also to squeeze the best out of it. Did I answer that question, Sushila?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And another interesting question is, while I understand the capability to clean the legacy, how do you prevent, manage further upload of documents with personal information onto the company's common repository? I think it's something around preventing, yeah.
Okay, if I understand your questions, see, it is, again, in the couple of earlier slides I highlighted, it is not about creating a data repository. Because the moment you are creating a data repository, centralized data repository, you are creating a copy of that. And of course, it continuously feeds or gets fed by those system of engagements. But the beauty of StoredIQ is it is not dependent on that centralized data repository. It does have the access to those applications in its native form and native location. So as and when the data is getting generated, StoredIQ doesn't wait for that application to go to the central repository, store the data, and then read from there. The moment the data is generated in the application itself, it starts reading it. And it starts populating in the dashboard, which I showed you in one of my slides. And that is how it maintains that continuity. It is not a one-time job. It maintains the continuity. And the best part about the StoredIQ is its info sets and a set of rule engines. So you define info sets, which is basically a logical group of objects pulled in together. In a demo, possibly we can substantiate it further. And then, based on certain rules, it helps you to action on it. So, in net-to-net, to answer your question, it is not dependent on the central repository of the data. While it can, but the best way to handle StoredIQ with respect to your organization is to start giving it the connection to your native applications in its native form, and it will do the job.
Yeah, absolutely. So another interesting question is, does it deal with data on cloud data stores like AWS, public cloud services, Bluemix, etc.? Are there built-in connectors, and are there any agreements that could service provider needs to enter with IBM?
Okay. That requires a 1 hour of meeting with this gentleman, whoever asked this question. But yeah, in a nutshell, I can tell you that we have all these ecosystems developed with our partners like AWS, Azure, and this solution is also available on cloud if you want. We have deployed it many organizations. IBM itself is using, just to substantiate my point, IBM is having probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of employees and customers in European jurisdiction, and we had to be GDPR compliant. And we have been using this tool for almost 400,000 employees, uncountable number of customers, and we have successfully done that. So be it cloud, be it on-prem, be it in terms of connectors, availability and all, we have a very full-blown ecosystem. We need to discuss further in what type of connectors or cloud infrastructure you are talking about. I would love to answer it further.
Yeah, and we can reach out to the gentleman to set up time in case if he wants to have a detailed explanation around this. Sure, and the next question is around encryption. So the question is, instead of encrypting the data files, can we use the pseudo, I'm trying to read the, yeah absolutely. Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, we can do that. So depending on, we have tools for both the things, right? So if you want to encrypt the tool, encryption is required from a regulatory perspective, right? If the authorities are asking that this set of data, so if you read the different articles, Article probably 22, if I'm not wrong, and 73, they talk about the encryption of different data in what form. But pseudonymization is also possible through other tools. You can do that. But in a nutshell, it depends what kind of data. And then you define those policies in StoredIQ itself, which will take action on.
Yeah. Yeah. And another question is around the licensing model. How is license model worked out for this? Is it user license or enterprise license model? What are the options?
Okay, I think I have already answered that question, and to answer it again, I'll have to meet that person. But jokes apart, yeah, it is very flexible licensing models we have. As I told earlier, it is based on capacity. So to minimize the total cost of ownership, we don't charge based on number of users, because if it becomes number of users, it is huge in number. Like one of our customers, they're using it for 30,000 endpoints for 30,000 employees in Europe. It comes very handy when the licensing is on a capacity basis, which is basically the number of codes. So if you want any further elaboration on it, we can have a meeting.
Sure, sure. So another question is around the auditing. Is auditing automated?
My best part, my favorite part about the auditing. Yes, auditing, you can have an automated process defined. Of course, it's a bit of customization and bit of services ingested into StoredIQ. But you can do automation. You can bring automation in auditing also. It is possible.
Sure, and some of you are requesting for a case study and white paper. We will certainly reach out to you and share the relevant details to you. And another question is around, we still have a couple of more minutes. Maybe we can take one last question. The question is, while scanning the enterprise repository, can the tool classify the files into those with higher number of PIs and those with less number of PI?
Yes, of course. That's the basic job of StoredIQ, what it does, right? Without that, the very purpose is defeated. So you define the indices there in terms of the sensitive personal information, those less important personal information, identifiable information. It's a scale in terms of its requirement, its presence, its a distribution across the enterprise, and then you see the overlapping there. If you saw one of those slides where I was showing the overlapping, it shows those overlapping. And then you create your own info set. Remember, info set, as I told, is a very handy tool in StoredIQ. You define what rules, define the logic, what you want to retrieve, on what indices you want to retrieve, and it will help you to retrieve those set of personal sensitive data. So whichever the questions you have in terms of StoredIQ's capability, just imagine that it is giving you an engine where you can define your set of rules, what you want to retrieve, from where you want to retrieve, and in what way you want to retrieve. These three things will help you to do anything in StoredIQ from a discovery and mapping point of view.
Sure, absolutely. I think we're close to the end of our scheduled time. We have a few more questions, and we will reach out to you through email explaining the answers for the queries you have raised. I would like to extend my thanks to Rakesh for taking us through this journey. It was so simple to understand and enlightening, and of course I can see that by the questions that we have received, it was quite interesting and engaging to you guys. Thanks very much for your time, and have a wonderful evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you once again. I would like to thank all the panel members, Mr. Maher, Mr. Ashla, and all the participants who joined us today. Hope you all spent a useful time. That does conclude the conference call. Wish you all a great day ahead. You may all disconnect your lines now. Thank you very much once again.